U.S. Senator Rand Paul and presidential hopeful. Senator, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Glad to be with you.
I want to talk to you about Hillary Clinton's decision to now oppose the Pacific Trade Pact deal. This is a flip-flop for her, don't you think?
Yeah, in fact, she sent me a copy of her book, and we've got it for sale now as fiction, since we can't really believe what she's telling us anymore. Could be truth, could be fiction, or maybe she's just changing her mind. But I've said from the very beginning that all of this trade discussion should be done in the open, should not be classified. And I've also said that really one of the problems we have up here is we've given the executive or the president too much power, and that I'm against the TPA, which is allowing so much power to gravitate, even more power to gravitate to the president.
Well, I was going to ask you about this book, of course. Want to get your sense of Hillary Clinton has been suddenly acting on her New York Times announcement that she was going to be more personable and funnier, I suppose. What do you think so far? She's been on SNL, and of course, it was a gag gift to send the Republican candidates this book. What do you think of her attempts to be funny?
I say good luck on that. We've taken the book and we put it up on eBay. I sent her a little note, or wrote in a note and the inscription in the book, and said, Hillary, your lack of defense and your lack of providing security for those in Benghazi should forever preclude you from holding higher office. And then I signed it, and we put it for sale, and it's now looks like several $1,000s are being bid on the book that she sent to me. We're re-auctioning it off on eBay.
Do you think that Donald Trump the boom is finally over?
I think there's been a celebrity skew to the race, and I think people will get tired. I think sometimes people think, vulgarity is humorous or, engaging, but then after a while people kind of get tired of it. And I think we're probably at the point where people are getting tired of it, and people are going to wake up and say, you know what, we're looking for someone serious to lead the country.
I want to talk to you about media mogul Rupert Murdoch, who had this really charged tweet yesterday insinuating that President Barack Obama is not a, quote, real black president. He has since apologized for that. Just want to get your sense in terms of whether or not the apology has gone far enough, and whether or not that sort of language is appropriate by somebody like Mr. Murdoch.
I don't really have any comment on it.
Really? I mean, everybody on social media has been pretty active about this. I mean, you're running against Ben Carson. He was implying that Ben Carson is more of a, quote, black president.
I don't think I have to comment on what everybody says on social media, so I could go to Facebook. Any other issues of the day?
Yeah, I want to talk to you. Recently, of course, Hillary Clinton came out with her gun control plan up in New Hampshire. You've got a pretty controversial plan yourself in terms of affixing a sticker to schools and saying that we have guns here. I mean, people are finding that, I think, a little controversial, considering that the Sandy Hook situation. And obviously the argument would be that those kids could have been saved if there was a gun on premises. But I mean, I think more guns, especially in the area where little children are being taught, is somewhat upsetting to a lot of folks, even up in New Hampshire.
Yeah, I would disagree. I think that we've had a rash of shooting, and there are some similarities to each of the shooting. They tend to be teenage white males who have mental illness issues, but they also tend to have occurred in gun-free zones. And so, no, I think that there is no easy answer, and I think it's wrong to insinuate that I've implied there is a simple answer. But I think part of the answer is letting people know that there are not going to be defenseless people that they can shoot. And so, yes, I do think concealed carry is something that is a deterrent. I think armed security guards, when they can be afforded, is a deterrent. And yes, indeed, there have been studies that show that when you announce to potential burglars and you do post signs on your property that you have an alarm or that you will be defended, that it does make a difference. And there have been studies showing that it is a deterrent. So, yeah, I think all of the above are important, but I don't think more gun control is the answer. In most of these instances, the guns have been registered and the guns have been legally purchased. So I don't think there is a silver bullet or a magic answer to this, but I do believe that deterrence is part of the solution.
Senator, the push here in Massachusetts is intensifying, as it is in many states, to legalize the recreational use of marijuana. How do you feel about that? Should that be the law of the land at some point?
I think that the federal government shouldn't interfere with the states, and that one of the ironies of the last presidential debate was that many of the governors on the stage were beating their chest and saying how proud they were that they supported the 10th Amendment, that those powers not delegated or enumerated and given to Congress should be left to the states and the people. Of course, they believed that until it got to an issue they disagreed with, like marijuana, and then they were all for having the federal government override state law. But I am a big believer that most criminal sentencing and what you decide to criminalize should be done at the state level, not the federal level. And if states like Colorado choose to have medical marijuana and or adult use marijuana, that is a prerogative of the states.
Senator, I had occasion to speak to former Massachusetts U.S. Senator Scott Brown this past weekend. He was talking about a discussion he had had with Donald Trump and impressing upon Mr. Trump, as Scott Brown put it, that it doesn't make any sense to take swipes at a Rand Paul who's 11th in the polls, that we need to start focusing more on policy discussions and less on sort of intra-party swipes. I'm not sure how you would feel about being characterized that way. If you have any feelings about Senator Scott Brown, I don't think you're on the list of names that he's having over to his house in New Hampshire to address voters. How do you feel about that remark?
I think that the presidential debate should emphasize more substantive solutions and discussion. And we've started to get into some of it. Some of it takes time, and we have to get beyond some of the pettiness. But some important parts of the beginning of the discussion, I think, began to arise last time. Particularly, I think, the discussion over whether or not we should have open lines of communication with Putin, for example. I think, Carly Fiorina, she has said she wouldn't discuss or have any kind of discussions with Putin. And I think that's a big mistake, and we need to think about that in choosing our leader. Many Republicans look to Reagan as a great leader, but Reagan did keep open lines of communication, fortunately, throughout the Cold War, and he actually did negotiate with the Soviet Union, but he negotiated from a position of strength. But I think not having communications, I think also drawing a red line in the sky for a no-fly zone is a huge mistake and risks a potential accident in that area. So I think it's something that we do need to discuss, and discussing who would be our next commander-in-chief.
You talk a little. Oh, go ahead, Jacqueline.
I wanted to ask you about Congressman Kevin McCarthy and the gaffe that he made recently regarding Hillary Clinton and these Benghazi hearings. Do you think that this could cost him the post as the next Speaker of the House?
I think the Benghazi hearings are incredibly important, and I've said all along that I think that Hillary Clinton's failing to provide security, failing to provide an adequate defense for the mission in Benghazi should preclude her from being commander-in-chief. When this happened in Mogadishu during Bill Clinton's administration, he fired the Secretary of Defense, Les Aspin, for not providing adequate security in Mogadishu and for turning down requests for equipment. I think it's been kind of glossed over, but for about 9 months preceding the ambassador's assassination, time and time again, Hillary Clinton was asked for more security, and she kept downgrading the security and sending people home. And I think that those decisions show a lack of wisdom.
But will it cost McCarthy his position? What does this do to McCarthy with this gaffe?
I'm not really too involved with deciding who the Speaker of the House will be, but I do think that the discussion of whether or not the Benghazi committee should be or is political, I think it's absolutely necessary, because I think it's a big deal trying to decide whether or not what went wrong with Benghazi and what Hillary Clinton's culpability is in that.
The next president will potentially have a chance to nominate Supreme Court people to the Supreme Court. If for whatever reason, if you're able to be in the Oval Office and have that chance, would you nominate somebody who was pro-choice or supports same-sex marriage?
If I were nominating people for the Supreme Court, I would make sure that they are an originalist, someone who looks at the actual text of the original Constitution, reads the Federalist Papers, and wants to go by the original intent. And the original intent of our founding fathers really was for a much smaller government, a government that wasn't involved with probably the vast majority of what's done in Washington today. We had a much, much smaller conception of government coming from our founding fathers, and that's what would be important to me.
So your choice would not take into account at all whether they are pro-choice or for same-sex marriage?
I think it wouldn't be on specific issues. It would be on whether or not they understand the Constitution. And obviously the Constitution impacts those decisions and impacts specific issues. But it wouldn't be, I have a lineup 1 or 2 issues or 3 or 4 issues. It would be on the Constitution and whether or not they believe in the original intent of the Constitution.
Those are such huge factors for most people when they are choosing nominees. You're telling me that wouldn't be in play at all?
No, I think you misunderstand.
Okay.
I think that obviously the Constitution has to do with contemporary issues, but it is a little bit more timeless than that.
What do you think about Joe Biden getting into the race? Will this really hurt Hillary Clinton, do you think?
Probably.
Do you think that would be the end for Hillary Clinton, and maybe if you are the party's nominee, you'd be going against Joe Biden?
You know, I think she's struggling, and it's still her race to lose, but I think Biden mixes it up more. And I think one possibility is that that people may well be surprised that the Democrat primary ends up being as competitive as the Republican primary.
You know, as Scott Brown pointed out, you are 11 in the polls. I mean, that must be, tough to deal with those poll numbers. What are you going to do to turn your campaign around and go from 11 to 1 and knock Donald Trump out?
You know, sometimes people get a little bit carried away with the polls, and I think it's a real mistake and does a disservice to the people who dedicate their lives to running for, a pretty important position. We've raised $16 million. We have people on the ground in both Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada. We have county chairmen in all 99 counties in Iowa, and we have a pretty formidable organization in the early primary states. And I don't think the polling necessarily reflects that. There are also a variety of polls. There are national polls, there are state polls, and then there are also polls about who does best against the Democrat opposition. And one of the interesting things from the polling is that we actually lead Hillary Clinton in 5 states that were previously won by President Obama. And part of choosing who our nominee will be is choosing a nominee who actually has the ability to win in the battleground states.
Senator, we're coming upon the first Democratic primary debate soon. Huge opportunity for one Bernie Sanders to actually make a national dent in Hillary Clinton's support. He's done it locally. We've seen polls in New Hampshire that show him very competitive with her. What do you make of Bernie Sanders, his policies, the things he espouses? Do you find more common ground with him than you would a Hillary Clinton?
I think it's very important for Americans not to succumb to the notion that there's anything sexy or cool about socialism. Bernie's a socialist, and ultimately socialism relies on force or implied force. And it wasn't an accident that Stalin killed millions of people or that Mao Zedong killed millions of people, because if you want to control the economy and you want to control ownership of things by the state, you have to forbid other people from owning parts of the economy or controlling parts of the economy. So I think it's really important that people understand that there is no free lunch. When Bernie offers you something for free, he's got to take it from somebody else first, and that all they're doing is obscuring who pays for it, but ultimately someone has to pay for things. And so if you want free college for those who goes to college, those who don't go to college and work will be paying for your college. So nothing's really on the surface. What appears to be free isn't free. I got time for one quick question, and I got to go.
Wanted to ask you about Hillary Clinton comparing the NRA to the Iranians and communists. What do you say about that?
Well, it shows a fundamental misunderstanding. The Bill of Rights, the Second Amendment's a pretty important part of the Bill of Rights, and for her to degrade an organization that is defending the Second Amendment, I think she does it at her own peril. And I think what ends up happening is that there's a lot of freedom-loving Americans that will never consider her for office, and rightly so. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Senator Rand.